Ever wonder what really separates a great founder from, everyone else? Turns out the answer isn't something you'd find in a textbook. It's actually something a lot more mischievous.
So, what's the secret sauce? Is it being a fundraising wizard? Having a genius-level IQ? An MBA from some fancy school? Nope. The source material we're digging into today points to something a little more unexpected.
Believe it or not, it's a piratical gleam. Yeah, you heard that right. It's this certain delight in breaking the rules. But hold on, we're not talking about just any rules. This is about a very specific type of what you might call productive naughtiness, the kind that challenges the status quo and actually looks for the harder problems to solve. All right, so here's the game plan. We're going to dive into what this piratical gleam is all about. Then we'll talk about unlearning the right way of doing things, how startups use this as a kind of guerrilla tactic, and, this is super important, which rules you absolutely cannot break. And finally, we'll get to what's really driving all this.
Okay, first up, the piratical gleam. Let's get one thing straight right away. When we talk about this naughtiness, we're not talking about being a delinquent. Not at all. This is all about being an innovator.
So here's the core idea. Productive naughtiness is really about intellectual independence. It's that little voice in your head that looks at something everyone does and just has to ask, wait, why do we do it that way? It's all about challenging those flimsy, conventional rules while, and this is key, holding on tight to a really strong moral compass. The rules that actually matter.
So, where does this need to break rules come from? Well, to get it, we kind of have to go back to the beginning, back to school. For most of us, that's where we learn to follow rules without question. And it turns out, great founders have to spend a lot of time unlearning those rigid formulas. Just think about how you were taught to write an essay in high school, right? You start with a perfect thesis statement, write 3 supporting paragraphs, blah, blah, blah. But is that how anything great is actually made? No way! The real way is messy. You start with a question, not an answer. You have false starts, you sketch things out, and you basically just keep rewriting until it works.
And this isn't just about writing, It's about programming. It's about building anything, really. There's this myth that you have to have this perfect, complete plan before you even touch a computer. But the reality? You just spew out some code, it's hopelessly broken, and you just gradually beat it into shape. Innovation happens in that messy middle part, in the debugging and the fixing. And get this, to put a number on it, on average, about 75% of a first draft gets completely deleted. Think about that. For every one word that makes it to the final version, 3 got thrown away. That process isn't failure. That's literally what creation looks like. Okay, so how does this break the rules mindset actually play out in the startup world? Well, it becomes a kind of superpower. It's like a guerrilla tactic. When you're small and fast, you can do things that the big, slow giants just can't. There's this great principle called run upstairs. Picture this. You're being chased by a huge, slow monster. You get to a staircase. You could run down, but maybe they can keep up. Or you can run up. It's harder for you, sure, but it's disproportionately harder for them. That's the whole idea. Startups win by deliberately choosing the harder problems. It's kind of like what guerrilla fighters do, right? They don't fight on the open plains. They go to the mountains, to the difficult terrain where the big clunky armies can't follow them. For a startup, that difficult terrain, that hard problem, that is the advantage. So why does this actually work? Well, think about it. Big companies are just drowning in bureaucracy and meetings. A startup can just build. They can move faster, take bigger risks. And when you solve a really hard problem, you create this massive barrier to entry. You've basically built a castle on a mountain that's almost impossible for anyone else to attack. All right, so we've been hyping up this idea of breaking rules, but let's pump the brakes for a second. This is super important. This is not a free pass for anarchy. There is a huge, bright red line between being a productive pirate and just being a crook. Which leads to the biggest question of all, right? If it's all about being naughty and breaking rules, does anything go? Can you just do whatever it takes to win? And the answer is a very, very clear no. Absolutely not. The entire idea, the whole concept of productive naughtiness, it only works if it's built on a rock-solid moral compass. Here's the difference, and it's everything. Productive rule breaking is about questioning the process. It's about challenging convention with intellectual honesty to find a better way. Destructive rule breaking, that's about lying, taking shady shortcuts, and just generally compromising your integrity.
Two totally different things. So what are these non-negotiable rules? Simple. Be honest. Don't bullshit people, especially your investors. If they ask you a tough question and you don't know the answer, don't make something up. These people are professional BS detectors. The best thing you can do is just say, I don't know, but here's how I'm going to find out. That intellectual honesty, that's your most valuable asset, period.
Okay, so if this whole thing isn't just about rebellion for the sake of it, then what's really driving it? What's behind that desire to question everything? Turns out the answer is something way more fundamental and way more powerful. It all comes down to one thing: curiosity. That's it. Your curiosity is the best guide you'll ever have. It never lies. It knows, better than you do, what's actually worth paying attention to. It's the thing that pulls you to the edges of a field and helps you spot the things nobody else sees. So, in the end, that piratical gleam we talked about, it's not about wanting to cause chaos. It's about having a brain that is just wired to constantly ask why. And when you do that, you start to realize that a ton of the rules we all follow, well, they don't have a good reason to exist. They're just habits. And right there, in that gap, that's where all the opportunity is. So I'll leave you with this to chew on. What's the most important flimsy rule that you follow every single day? You know, that one process or convention you just do because that's how it's always been done. Now imagine what you could create, what you could build if you just had the guts to break it.